Shalom Akim, Kahalaim La, Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, Bahashem, Kudash, and double honors to great and apostles, and the elder bishops of Great Millstone. Thaddeus Yahshua for the strength and all to make this video, and Yaratas are that you find this video edifying and exhorting. So, obviously, just from this image here, don't know if you could tell me smiling from the screen, but yeah, this is a president or the leader of China. What's his name? Xi Jinping. And just from this guy's video, Max Fisher, I decided to watch this to see, okay, how did Moab pretty much heal or solve the oil conflict, which is Nero's mess. As I named this video, Moab cleaning up Nero's mess. So of course, aka the Washpot. Because considering the US and the US-Israel conflict with Iran, and then Iran, of course, as a response, closing the Strait of Hormuz. This video is going to get into it. Of course, clearly that would have been a hindrance in terms of the oil export and import system. But Moab, he played his role as a washpot, and we're going to find that out real soon. So prior to that, let me get a precept, then I'm going to start off this video. This is Psalm 60 and verse 8. It says, Moab is my washpot, so that's Yahweh's washpot. Over Edom will I cast out my shoe. Philistia, triumph thou because of me. And in the NLT it says, but Moab is my wash basin, which of course, those of you who have lived either village life, so-called West Africans, Southern tribe, or in the West Indies in terms of the islands, typically over there you use a wash basin, to wash your plates, or even to wash clothes as well. You use a big wash basin, or a big bowl essentially. So, but Moab, my wash basin, will become my servant, and I will wipe my feet on Edom and shout in triumph over Philistia. So of course, even in geopolitics, of course, in a more so economic sense, Moab is doing his job as a as a wash spot. As the little joke, clean up on aisle 3, please. You probably heard that in multiple movies. So let's get back to the video, and then I'll bring out a few more precepts. Before I get that, let me get this one. It says John 10 and 10, because again, as I named it, Nero's mess, considering what he did to provoke Iran to close the Strait of Hormuz. So John 10 and 10, the thief cometh not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. You see, so again, key point is in the top part of that verse. That verse where it says, the thief cometh not but for to steal, to kill, and to destroy. He did that with Venezuela, of course, with President Maduro being captured. Of course, and again, for alleged narcotics accusations, which probably are true nevertheless, because how Jake be. But yeah, he came to steal the oil, and of course, in terms of killing and destroying, he's done that in the past to our people. Anyways, when you look at the Native American Indian history, as well as the Latin American history as well. But in this case, he's taken and captured the oil of Venezuela. That's Nero. So of course he's trying to do the same thing with Iran, and Iran's like, nah, you ain't gonna do that trick. You ain't gonna do that trick again on us. You did it on Venezuela, but you ain't gonna do no trickery on us. So let's see what Moab did in order to soften the effects or the potential effects of the oil crisis. So again, as the title goes here by Max Fisher, China quietly, which again, China or the Moabites, quietly saved the world last month. And this was uploaded 17th July, so a few days ago.
So you remember at the start of the Iran war, everyone said there was this oil shock coming that was going to basically blow up the whole world.
World fears an oil shock.
Oil shock.
Oil shock.
Global oil shock is raising alarm.
This has the potential to be the biggest oil shock in history.
All the flights were going to get grounded.
Airlines are saying expect flight cancellation.
They are canceling flights.
13,000 flights have been cancelled.
Cities were going to go dark.
The final vessel carrying jet fuel into the United Kingdom is going to get here in 48 hours, and there's no more after that.
Gas was going to triple in price if you could get any at all.
Situation's looking pretty dire.
Gas prices are expected to go up again.
It would take months to recover.
This was just hard math. The world's oil was going to dry up, and that would be that.
How we emerge from this crisis will define us for a generation.
And then it just kind of never happened.
Oil futures, they're telling you in August, actually, prices are coming down.
Markets seem to be showing far less alarm than they did at the start of the conflict.
And it's not like the predictions turned out to be based on some mistake. You can go back and check their math. It's right. The world should have ended like 4 weeks ago. No, something happened that no one expected, that no one thought was even possible. The world got a savior, and it was the last person that you would guess. Yes, it was the General Secretary himself, the party chairman, Chinese President Xi Jinping. And if you're thinking, okay, why didn't I hear about this? It's because China pulled it off basically in secret, which is kind of a weird way for an aspiring superpower to save the world. And it gets even weirder because the country they saved most of all is their chief rival, the United States.
Again, this as he mentioned as well, this also feeds into that, well, fake facade of a narrative where Moab, aka the Chinese, the Chinaman, is the next superpower of the world. But again, that's the illusion. What people don't know is that this is just in a temporary phase within Esau's kingdom. Once Esau's kingdom goes down, there ain't going to be no other superpower but Israel. You know, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native American Indians will be under Yahushua's rule. And that's the only control, that's the only kingdom, that's the only superpower that will be established for an eternity. China, you know, all of this is just, you know, as an elder may call it sometimes, theatrics, you know, all just for show. China ain't going to be the next superpower, nor Russia. But nevertheless, they still got to play their role and, you know, make people think certain things.
Well, today we are going to pull back.
And those certain things, which is like, again, aka, okay, who's going to be the next superpower after America? That's a falsehood, just to make that clear.
The curtain on how China saved the world from the Iran oil shock. We're going to start by piecing together what China did that saved the world, since it happened in secret. We're going to unravel how China did it, because this should simply not have been possible to pull off, which will help us to answer why China did it, the theories for what was behind all this. And finally, we are going to look at what this changes in our global economic order. This is a crazy one, guys. This story is crazy. So let's get into it.
And you got a lot of people like this who actually dig deep into these matters, and it helps actually understand, again, you know, on a more, well, yeah, I'll use that word again, you know, geopolitical level, you know, which involves, of course, economics and, you know, the location of certain things and how it affects political power. You know, but nevertheless of that, it just helps in terms of understanding what's going on physically and how that aligns with scriptures as well. So yeah, Moab is playing his role, man. Even Edom needs his mess cleaned up by Moab. You know, that's why I named the video Moab cleaning up Nero's mess. And of course, Nero is referring to Trump. You know, Nero was a former Roman emperor. You know, in due time, but eventually Yaratazar may do a video on it, but you know, you could do your research on that.
Okay, so to understand what China did, we're going to use the board to map out the global oil economy, what happened to it from the Iran war, and then what China did to save it from completely imploding. Good? So the main thing about oil is it's traded in one unified global market. That means all the world's producers sell into the same big supply of oil, which the world's consumers all buy from. And this is why when something happens in any part of the oil world, like say a war in the Middle East, it affects everyone. And on any given day, there are about 100 million barrels moving through this system. 100 million barrels produced every day. And that is also 100 million barrels that gets consumed every day. And it's really important that these two numbers are the same. Every drop of oil that gets produced every day gets sold and consumed every day. There is zero slack in the system. And that is why it is such a big deal when the Iran war starts and Iran shuts down the Strait of Hormuz. And doing this, shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, blocks 20 million barrels of oil per day from reaching the world. So now we've only got 80 million barrels a day in output to meet 100 million barrels a day in demand, right? This equation no longer balances. We now have a 20 million barrel a day deficit. And this deficit means that pretty soon, 20% of the oil-consuming world was going to power down. That's 1 in 5 flights, 1 in 5 factories, power plants. It's a global calamity. Still, the world is ready with a couple of defenses, including this: oil pipelines that go around Hormuz.
This is the east-west pipeline known as Petroline.
That big one is controlled by Saudi Arabia, and then the United Arab Emirates controls the other main one.
This is the Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, so the small one, United Arab Emirates, and then what do you say, Saudi Arabia or Abu Dhabi? Oh, let me rewind that again. I believe it's Saudi Arabia. They control this big one here. Hold on.
This is the east-west pipeline known as Petroline.
That big one is controlled by Saudi Arabia, and then the United Arab Emirates controls the other main one.
This is the Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline.
And these pipelines add about 7 million barrels of oil back into the system. It's a lot. Okay, so now just to make sure we're keeping score, we're at a negative 13 million barrel a day deficit. Right, we removed 20 million barrels from the system, we added 7 million back in, 13 million deficit. It's better, but it's still really bad. Okay, so you guys are still with me? The other big defense that the world has is strategic petroleum reserves, emergency stockpiles of oil. These tanks are all full of oil. America and other countries keep huge stockpiles like this for emergencies. And there are even bigger US stocks I can't show you because they're kept in huge salt caves thousands of feet underground. Tons of countries have these reserves. Here's Japan's, one of the world's largest. A week into the war, 32 of these countries got together and all opened up their reserves to the world. This was the largest release of reserve oil in history. Hundreds of millions of barrels from dozens of countries. It was a huge deal. But the war dragged on, and it was stretching out these releases. So in the end, they added up to an average 2.5 million barrels per day. So these were the world's big defenses for a mass oil shock like what happened in the Iran war. And together, these bring our deficit down to 10.5 million barrels a day. This is still a calamity. More than
So all these are just alternative solutions that, you know, the world came together and tried to diminish the what's the word? The grip that Iran had by controlling the Strait of Hormuz, or limiting the access to the Strait of Hormuz, the movement of oil. So far, of course, as you can see from the board, they use alternative pipelines like the one from Saudi Arabia, the one that Saudi Arabia controls, as well as the little one over here that the United Arab Emirates controls. So that adds about 7 million. Hence why you had that calculation there formerly. And then that adds 2.5 million from the stockpiles, you know, the ones that they have in reserves. And now it's gone from about minus 20 million to minus 10.5. So of course he's going to go in deeper to see how China really diminished that number immensely.
a tenth of global energy usage. And it gets worse. Those 32 emergency stockpiles from all over the world, they are running out. Here's America's reserve. It's dropping hard and fast towards zero. And here's Japan. It's same thing, absolutely plunging. So not only are these reserves tiny relative to the hole they have to fill, but they're only good for a few months and then they are gone, man. Which is exactly why everyone looked at all this and said, yeah, the world is ending. Until a few weeks in, people started to notice something.
To be more specific, Esau's world is not gonna end until that MOTB gonna be released, that chip implant gonna be released, and of course America gets destroyed by those nuclear missiles, which will be sent by the other nations, as the scriptures say. Let the weak say, "I am strong." In Joel, I believe, chapter 3.
Weird happening.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, or good evening, or wherever you are.
This is from a conference call a business intelligence firm called Kepler held back in April, walking its clients through what was going on in the oil market. And they focused on one thing in particular.
What's happening with China, right? So I just want to look at China monthly imports right now.
China's oil imports, that's those bars in the chart, had suddenly dropped to half. Half.
See, and how long could that carry on?
I know those guys did not seem super emotive about this, market analysts, but trust me when I say, this discovery made people lose their minds. And let me give you some context for why. This shows China's oil imports since 1980, and that rise is one of the biggest stories in the history of oil. This is where China surpassed the US as the world's biggest oil importer and just kept going. Oil has powered China's rise from the start. It fuels their factories, lights their cities, it's the engine of their economy. Yes, China has been building lots of solar and wind, but renewables like that still produce just a fraction of the power that they get from coal, gas, and especially oil, which is why it seemed impossible that right after the Iran war started, China's imports that have been rising for decades dropped overnight by half. This decline here, 5.5 million barrels a day, is equivalent to more than all of India's oil imports. More than Europe's 5 biggest economies combined. This was the thing that saved the world, China. China took its imports and magically cut it by 5.5 million barrels a day. Which means that what started...
Moab is my washpot. Moses using Moab to save Esau, man. To save Nero, to be specific, aka, of course, the representative of America, aka modern day Babylon or Egypt.
As a 20 million barrel a day deficit from Hormuz closing is now, after all those alternate pipelines, plus emergency stockpiles, plus China doing whatever it's doing, means that deficit is now down to just 5 million barrels a day. And look, that's not great, that's still pretty serious, but everybody shaving 5% off of their oil usage instead of 20% is the difference between mass blackouts and economic collapse, which is what we thought we'd get, and a few months of higher gas prices, localized flight cancellations, and some gas lines in Southeast Asia, which is what we got instead. So yeah, I would call that basically saving the world, really thanks to this guy. And before we go further, I want to thank our sponsor for enabling us to bring you this video. AI free using the link in the QR code or in the video description. So now let's get back to our story. But China has not said a thing, hasn't acknowledged they're doing this, hasn't said how or why, just stopped importing oil by the largest amount any country has ever stopped importing oil. Poof, overnight cold turkeyed this substance that the entire industrialized world, and China especially, have made essential to their daily functioning for 100 years. And since China won't tell us how they did this, we're just gonna have to piece it together ourselves, starting with a quiet change China made right at the start of the war.
I'm not the kind of girl who talks to guys in the street. In London, you cross paths with people.
We're just gonna have to piece it together ourselves, starting with a quiet change China made right at the start of the war. This article from 2 weeks into the war revealed that China had ordered a total ban on fuel exports. The context here is China has a huge refinery industry, and what it does is it turns raw crude oil into stuff like jet fuel and gasoline. And most of those fuels stay within China, but because they're good at it, they export a bunch of it to all over Asia. Until March, when China banned those...
That's the thing about Moab, the Chinese, they like the... How can I say this? I was about to say manufacturers of the world, but you offset the you offset the manufacturing, the systematic manufacturing off to Moab, man. I remember Apple as well, watching another documentary or these type of videos, based on technology and companies as well. Apple, I believe they shifted their manufacturing from China to India a few years ago as well. But yeah, Moab, is one of those nations of which you just offset the you offset the main work, the main systematic work to them.
Refiners from exporting a drop of fuel. And at the time, everyone assumed this was to preempt a potential fuel shortage within China by building up stockpiles. And one reason I say assume is that this ban was imposed, that's right, in secret. That's why the story is credited to 4 sources with knowledge of the matter. That means off the record. But that assumption about why China was doing this was wrong. Turns out it wasn't to stockpile jet fuel or gasoline. It was because China was about to stop importing half of its oil, so those refineries were about to do a lot less refining. So rough math, I'm going to say that accounts for cutting about 500,000 barrels in daily demand out of the 5.5 million that China cut overall. Okay, next big move, and if you care about climate change or air quality, you're going to want to cover your ears here. Coal. This is from a few weeks before the war, why China is building so many coal plants. And it found that China commissioned more than 50 large-scale plants last year alone. So once the war started, China spun a bunch of those plants online or pushed its existing plants into overdrive, or probably both. But by April, it was burning a record amount of coal. China also figured out a way to use coal instead of oil to make plastics, which usually is a petroleum product. They also found a way to use coal to make fertilizer, which usually also is an oil byproduct. All of which allowed them to, say it with me, import less oil. And we're not sure the exact amount, but let's just say, and this is a guess, another 500,000 barrels. Now, by all accounts, life remained completely normal within China, like even more so than it did in the United States, where gas prices were crazy. But China did find some ways to nudge people to use less fossil fuels. According to this Wall Street Journal story, for example, after Chinese airlines canceled a bunch of internal flights and air passenger traffic declined about 6%, there was also a 5% rise in rail passenger traffic, meaning people just took the train. And by May, electric cars accounted for about a quarter of all vehicles on the road, up 33% from a year earlier. Now,
that's another thing about this oil crisis as well. It will be used in order to push more, electric-based vehicles, EVs as they call them for short, as well as systems of which can just be shut down, by the press of a button, supposedly. Because in the MOTB system, Mark of the Beast system as well, everything will be just based on, electronics, so that's easier to control. Anything digital can just be wiped out easily. It can be controlled easily as well. And again, that's why the money is going to be programmable. Well, not that the money right now we got in our so-called, in our supposed bank accounts, not that ain't programmable, but it'll be more controlled in the MOTB system, and the difference will be very clear. Because remember, on the app, when you open your phone, on the app, you open your bank account, it's literally just digits. All it takes is for some kind of a malfunction, and then from there, you don't have access to that money anymore. So again, it's like a form of trickery right there. Anyways, let's get back to this though.
China can't make and distribute 50 million new EVs overnight, but if you already got a large fleet in people's hands from years of subsidies, then when gas prices spike because, say it with me, China stopped importing oil, people with gas cars will start carpooling in their friend Xiaomi SU7 EV, they'll start taking the train, and gas consumption will go down. The effect of this one is hard to measure, but let's just call it another...
Remember, typically, Moab is seen as the tester, the test subject, because they're the ones with the social credit score system. They're the ones with the digital yuan, which is the name of their currency. Essentially, the way China's dealing with it right now, of course, in secret, can be seen as a reflection of how the other nations would implement a similar strategy. Tell people, all right, take more trains, go buy an EV car. You gonna see it. The presidents are gonna start speaking. The presidents and prime ministers of the world, the leaders of the world are gonna start saying, all right, do this, do that, considering the oil shortage, which is all manufactured. At the end of the day, it's through the will of Yahweh Shem Yahushai. But there is a intended outcome, aka the MOTB system, the beast system, which is what the AI is going to be involved in, the data centers are going to be involved in, the chip implants are going to be involved in. It's all that internet of bodies, the internet of things. Everything connected, smart homes and smart cities, everything connected and tracked. Because, Esau Edom, he wants to be like the Most High, Isaiah 14, verse 40.
500,000 barrels. Remember, that is more than half of all the oil that France imports. It is a lot. But we're still not really close to explaining all 5.5 million in China's disappearing demand. And that's because we've got one big thing left. This is China's real secret weapon. And it's something that we, the world, did not know about until now. It's in silos just like this. This is a chart of the world's largest oil reserves at the start of the war before they got used up. But there's one country missing here, China. And the size of China's oil reserve is, you guessed it, a state secret. But we can get a decent idea. These are some of China's crude oil silos. And the two main things to know about them are that they're really, really big and that the domes on them go up and down based on how full they are. All of which is fully visible from space. There are people whose whole job is to count those silos and how full they are to track how much oil China has saved up. They have more sophisticated ways to check those numbers too, but the silo counting works pretty well. And those silos alone suggest China has 1.4 billion barrels saved up. That's more than every other country's stockpile added together. It would be enough to fill a 12-foot tank the size of Manhattan. And this is just the oil we know about. China also has oil stashed at factories and refineries around the country. And it's been building huge underground caverns to store oil away where no one can count it up. So actually, China might have way more than even the 1.4 billion barrels that we can see. Which means China could use up, let's say, 4 million barrels a day from those reserves, and it would still take more than a year to run out. And maybe even a lot more, depending on how many of those caves it has. Now, I cannot tell you how crazy this is. India, for example, could live off of its stockpile for about 4 days. Europe's stockpile could serve it for maybe 10 or 20 days. And the US stockpile, which took decades to build up and is the envy of the world, would be good for 60 days, which is why, even with the US still importing from all sorts of sources outside the Middle East, Trump cried uncle 3 months into the war. So you can understand.
60 days is about 2 months. So imagine China's got a reserve of 1 year or even more, already. So you can see why they're very confident, man. Speaking of confidence, let me get to Jeremiah 48, because that speaks on Moab and their downfall as well. All right, this is Jeremiah 48 and verse 7. For because thou hast trusted in thy works. You see, Moab's been working hard, man, getting them oil reserves as well. So that they don't have they're not gripped or weakened by the US, which America's already fallen, and they know it themselves too. But nevertheless, Moab is just playing his part in this in the Most High's movie. So Jeremiah 48 and 7, for because thou hast trusted in thy works and in thy treasures, their possessions, what they've built up, thou shalt also be taken, and Chemosh, which is one of their idols, their so-called gods, shall go forth into captivity with his priests and his princes together. And the spoiler shall come upon every city, and no city shall escape. So destruction is destined for the Chinese, aka Moab. The valley also shall perish, and the plain shall be destroyed, as the Lord Yahweh hath spoken it. So again, which really, again, I'm going to just repeat the point again, man. Moab's just playing his so-called role, to make the other nations think, or people who are on the more ignorant side of things, just having the lens of the world and not spiritual lens. But for those of us who have spiritual lens, we know that he's just playing a small role until Esau's kingdom is demolished. And then it'll be Yahushua's kingdom, the kingdom of Israel, that will take over straight after Esau falls. So yeah, anyways, Moab is destined for destruction. So in spite of that, you can see why he'll be very confident, man, because it says, thou hast trusted in thy works. And in fact, I'll read it in the NLT as well. Jeremiah 48 and 7. It says, because you have trusted in your wealth and skill, which the wealth is also realistically the resources you own, you possess, aka the oil. Because if you do research on oil, it's a fundamental natural resource that keeps the world and the economies going. So because you have trusted in your wealth and skill, you will be taken captive. Your god, again an idol, Chemosh, with his priests and officials, will be hauled off to distant lands. All the towns of your all the towns will be destroyed, and no one will escape, either on the plateaus or in the valleys, for the Lord Yahweh has spoken. And that's that. It's the words of Yahweh Shem Yahshai here, man. You know, the Mosai said this is Moab's destiny, the destiny of the Chinese. So all of this is just, part of the story, but we know his latter end. Same for Esau as well. All right, back to the video now. I'm gonna wrap it up shortly.
From all sorts of sources outside the Middle East, Trump cried uncle 3 months into the war. So you can understand the shockwaves it sent when it turned out China, the world's biggest oil consumer, had saved up so much it could cut itself off from the world like this without breaking a sweat. But this raises a whole other question. How did China stow away this secret and impossibly huge universe of oil, a Manhattan of oil? Where did it all come from? And there are basically two answers to this. Answer number one is Iran, and answer number two is Russia.
Which are their closest allies, man. You know, Russia, Iran, of course, working alongside China as well. But I'm gonna leave it at that, Akim. You know, if you want to watch the video, I'll put the link in the description. You know, but that's the name of the video. China quietly saved the world last month. Which again, they're just playing a minor role in the movie of Yahweh Shem Yahshai. And that's the YouTuber there, Max Fisher. So yeah, we'll leave it at that. Shalom, Yahweh Shem Yahshai, Barakatham. But again, you know, Moab is my Washpot. You know, Psalm 60 and 8. You know, Moab cleaning up Nero's mess. You know, so again, Trump trying to collect all the oil he can. He tried to do it with the tribe of Asher, you know, Venezuela. You know, he succeeded with that. The Most High allowed him to collect that. But then he's trying to do the same thing with Iran. So again, there's devious intentions at play here. So yeah, Shalom, Yahweh Shem Yahshai Barakatah.